Samsoon comes along and she is loud and says it like it is and uses lots of swear words, which was so refreshing. The broadcaster at the time even got complaints about how she was too vulgar. It was so out of the norm for what they were used to hearing. It's wild to me that they tried to push these characters on us as overweight and on the verge of becoming a spinster, unmarriageable. Today we're going to talk about My Name is Kim Samsoon, or if you're going by the international English language name, My Lovely Samsoon. But I wish they had stuck to the original title, kept the literal one, because I think thematically it makes so much sense. It's such a key part of this character's personal journey. It's very central to the concept of the show. It is a rom-com, but I think it's really more importantly, it's about her central sort of place in the world. This is a drama from 2005, and this often gets called the Korean Bridget Jones, and that's pretty accurate. It's around the same time, it's not too many years behind when Bridget Jones was at the peak of its popularity, and they share a lot of, the similar themes. Both Samsoon and Bridget are in their early 30s, starting to feel like they're getting to the end of marriageable age. They're still single. There's a lot of social pressure on them to find a partner and maybe prove that they're not unlovable. They're both also very notable for being called out as being overweight, which is crazy if you look back at the time, but also pretty indicative of how toxic that beauty ideal was back in the early 2000s when heroin chic was in. Wayfish fashion was the ideal. I mean, to be fair, Korea always had a fixation on extreme thinness, and it's not so far off today, but at the time it was really excessive. And when we look back at the characters of Samsoon and Bridget, they look completely normal, very attractive young women, and it's wild to me that they tried to push these two characters on us as somehow like, isn't she so relatable? She's just ordinary and average looking, and we're thinking, no. I mean, I guess if anything, I'm glad that when we look back, that stands out to us because maybe it's indicative that we've moved on and adopted healthier ideals. But in the drama, it was so prevalent, this air of her being not fat, but overweight and chubby and on the verge of becoming a spinster, unmarriageable. There's a scene early on when she's going to a dating agency and she's literally told that she has to aim lower because her own qualifications put her in like a lower tier. And so she's got to go for like the older, less attractive, maybe less desirable partners as well. I was, rewatching the show in preparation for this, and I was one, struck by how well it holds up and how good it is and how much I loved it at the time, but still love it now. And two, how some of these things are really kind of dated in a way that is expected, but also some of these things are dated in a way that surprised me. So that said, let's get into this main character. She really is the heart and soul of the show. So Samsoon. The name Kim Samsoon, it's not common, but it's very plain. And so Sam means three, and Soon is just a suffix that you put to indicate a girl name. And Shik indicates a boy. To Samsoon, she's always felt like she's been sort of like an afterthought. It's almost indicative of her place in the family is like less important. You didn't even give me a real name. You just made me third daughter, third girl. And on top of that, it's not a common pairing of those two syllables. And so it sounds just like old-fashioned. And so she has been made fun of it in school and when she was younger. And so she has this kind of insecurity, deep inferiority complex about her name, sort of like, I'm maybe the reason that my life hasn't taken me on the path that I wanted it to is because I got off on the wrong start. You gave me a bad name. And so she has taken it into her mind to change her name. And the name she picks is Heejin, which is, it's a very common, normal sounding, pretty name. I guess it sounds kind of like a Katie, and that becomes significant because the other woman in the show is actually a Heejin and encapsulate everything that Samsoon is not. What's interesting about Samsoon is, aside from the fact that she was at the time considered unattractive, or I will say maybe not unattractive, but very average, very normal looking in terms of her look or her fashion or her style. That isn't the thing that got her down. What I love and what I think a lot of people really loved about this character is that she had full confidence in herself, despite being pointed at every turn as being, oh, that girl, like her. She was fully confident in her own self worth and her own value as a person. Just her name. Her name was the thing she didn't like. It didn't necessarily hurt her feelings to be told that she was, getting old at 30, which is, again, like a sign of the times. 30 was so old, and if she wasn't careful, she wasn't going to get a man. And at one point, she even is saying how, like, oh, this might be my last chance at love because this might be the last guy I meet who can love me. Oh, there's this whole like series long struggle for her to try to adopt this new name, and it finally culminates in her deciding to accept who she is. And that's also one interesting thing about the hero, the main character played by Hyun. It's something that he doesn't even understand why she's insecure about. And he's like, your name is Samsoon. I like your name. What's wrong with your name? And she's like, no, it's old fashioned and it's tacky and I don't like it. How would you like it if I called you Samshik? Which is the boy equivalent of that name. And so that's how she starts calling him Samshik. And he's supportive of her keeping her name, and at some points even blocks her from getting a name change, which we'll talk about that in a second and how that plays. So Samsoon is not only not fitting the physical ideal for beauty at the time, she's also very loudmouth and she swears a lot, which was different on TV in particular. So this drama aired in 2005, and I think at the time we were very used to that Candy/Cinderella heroine who was kind of put upon, long-suffering, enduring, sweet, docile maybe, and with a hidden strength. And Samsoon comes along and she is loud and I wouldn't say obnoxious because I think she made sense at all the time. Like she was the kind of person who stood up for what she believed in and says it like it is and uses lots of swear words, which was so refreshing, but was actually so jarring that I think the broadcaster at the time even got complaints about how she was too vulgar as a character. And they're like, oh, we love this character. We love this drama, but could you tone it down a little? Because it was so out of the norm for what they were used to hearing. And if you go back and watch it, it's actually not that harsh. It doesn't require bleeping because it's not too profane. It's just, I think maybe she's like a creative swearer, and so she strings together lots of harsh words. They aren't necessarily profanity, but she's considered crass at the time. But I loved her. I loved how she stood up to, if she ever saw somebody doing something wrong, she was very willing to call people out, but not in a self-congratulatory or performative way. It was just, she had a very strong sense of inner code of what to do and what was good and what was right and wrong. And interestingly too, is she's also she has a soft side. It doesn't seem like it tracks, but really it's consistent with her just being true to herself. There were times, I swear, when I was watching this drama where I wanted her to not give in. I wanted her to make them hurt, make him pay, make him suffer. And she doesn't. And that really got me at the time because I was like, no, don't give him what he wants. He needs to earn it. But it was consistent with her character, who was very mature. I'm not here to hurt people. I'm here to just be honest about my feelings. So she could be very soft and considerate when she was in that situation. It's just that the main character, the guy, Hyun, often pushed her buttons in exactly the wrong ways, so that wasn't the side that we got to see. Speaking of Hyun, we should probably talk about casting too, because this drama, when it aired, the two leads, Kim Seona playing Samsoon and Hyun playing Hyun Jin-hun, they were known, but this drama made them household stars, and they also made household stars out of the two supporting leads, which were played by Jung Ryeo-won and Daniel Henney. I'm going to say Jung Ryeo-won is probably a name that doesn't look like it's spelled. It's Jung Ryeo-won. So Kim Seona, when she came in, had done some leading roles, but this was truly the one that kind of made her career. And when Hyun came in, he was often described as like a rising star or a new face, a rookie actor. He had done a couple of things that were that put him on the map, like Nonstop 4, which was a young sitcom, and then the drama Island. But this is the one that made Hyun. Jung Ryeo-won was interesting because early reports actually had Han Ye-sul cast in the role instead. It was going to be a reunion of Hyunbin and Han Yeseo because they were paired together in Nonstop 4. And I could see why they might have chosen Han Yeseo because the character needs to speak English fluently, and Han Yeseo, grew up in the States and could do that. But for whatever reason, it was cast with Jung Yo-won. And Daniel Henney, this was the start of his fame. He's an American, and he had gotten a few CF modeling and commercial contracts. And I think one notable campaign that he had done was with Chun Ji-hyun. So he was starting to get a little bit of traction. This is where he comes in and he speaks no Korean in it. The character's American, and he and Jung Yo-won are speaking in English most of the time. And that was the start of his career. Probably the most notable thing about this casting was that Kim Seon-ah gained weight for it. So you will read everywhere that she gained 15 pounds to play this role because it was so key to the character. And, if you look at that character, she's not by any means overweight at all, but it speaks to how thin she was, that was considered, such a big feat. And although there have been instances of a lot of Hollywood actors putting on or losing weight for roles, it was really remarkable that anyone would willingly put on weight. I think the premium on absolute thinness is so high that it was shocking that somebody would risk, what if they couldn't lose the weight afterward? That somebody would do that just for a role. And I think she got a lot of credit for that. I mean, can you imagine if she was really stick thin and everyone was pretending she was overweight? It was hard enough with her already with the weight gain, not being that much of a weight gain. But if she hadn't, then I think it would have been really hard to buy into that character. And I think honestly, Kim Seon-ah had to have been cast in this role because she plays this character with such straightforward confidence and honesty and no insecurity. Because Korean society and ideals of beauty in general were just so fixated on weight, there was this weird fixation afterward as well with her losing the weight again. And I loved Kim Seon-ah for just being so just matter of fact and blunt, and it's she knew what they were trying to get her to say and she wasn't playing that game. So I remember her being interviewed afterward, maybe a couple of months after the drama had wrapped, and the reporter was trying to lead her into a whole discussion of weight and saying oh, you look really good. Have you lost weight? How much have you lost? And she just cut him off and was like, no, not a single pound. Nope. I haven't changed at all. And I appreciated her just kind of not wanting to linger in that space, to not really entertain that prurient interest in weight loss. I don't know. Maybe it's a double-edged thing because she did take on the character. So maybe if you take on the character, maybe it comes with the territory. But it was one thing to do it for the role, but I didn't really love how the media kept harping on it. I just think hyperfixation was not a good thing for us, for any of us. Ratings. This is another category where if you're doing any research on this show, it's going to come up as one of the top things. They're going to say it's, 50% ratings, half the country was watching, massive ratings hit. So yes, that's true. Let's dig into it a little bit because there's, of course, some nuance there. So if you look at the top rated dramas of all time domestically in Korea, what their ratings numbers were, Samsung comes in at number 26 in the rankings. A lot of the top rated shows in that list are from the 90s. And I think you have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt because the drama landscape was different in the 90s. There were, no cable or very few cable channels. And it was just the 3 terrestrial linear broadcasters. And so it was a lot easier, for instance, if one drama is doing really well, for everyone to just be watching that one drama. There weren't as many options. So when you see the number 1 show, the number 1 through 5 shows, their highest rating logs in the 60 percentile, which is huge, by the way, not to diminish that achievement. 60% is crazy, but it's a different thing than something in a much more mature landscape years later achieving that same number. So of the top dramas, the number 1 show of all time is First Love. That's a 1996-97 drama, and its top rating comes in at 65.8%. The number 2 rating is from the show called What is Love, which is also from the 90s, and it comes in at 64.9%. Then Sandglass, 64.9%. That's the 1995 drama, etc., etc. So when you get into the 2000s is when it starts to get a little more interesting because that's a little bit more apples to apples here. You did have some really huge hits in the early 2000s, like All In, Lovers in Paris, Hojun, which is a historical drama, Jumong, and 대장금, Jewel in the Palace. Those are all clocking in sort of like in the 50% range. And this doesn't mean the entire show. It means their highest rated episode got 50% rating share. Samsoon's finale episode did break the 50% mark. It was the only episode to do that. And depending on which ratings number you're looking at, it's either 50.1% or 49.1%. I see a lot of reports using the 51.1% number. It's a little inaccurate because that's not the country rating. That's like the Seoul capital area only. Samsoon premiered already as a hit. It was around 19%. And within, the first week, it hit 20%. And within the second week, it hit 30%. And after that, it was like a slow, steady climb upward every episode until it hit 50 in that last episode. There was an immediate buzz around it. It had that feel of being like a phenomenon in the making. Reruns were also a hit, and you could go onto the MBC, like the broadcaster website, and then rewatch the episode after it had aired online, and it was so popular that it kept crashing the website, and fans started asking for refunds because they couldn't buffer. There was a competitor drama. It's called 부활, Resurrection, and it was, I think, kind of like a cult show where it was very highly anticipated. It was recognized for being kind of like a premium, good quality show, but because Samsung comes in and is this massive hit against it, Puhar fans actually wrote like petitions into their broadcaster asking for Puhar to be aired on the weekends so that they could catch it. Basically, people who were watching the live broadcast of Samsoon could then also catch the Puhar episodes on the weekends. Let's get into the story a little bit. So there are a lot of things about Samsoon that truly stand the test of time, and I'm so glad that when I went back to rewatch it, it largely holds up because it has such a warm place in my heart as being one of my favorites, and it has this really lovely introspective bent. There are moments where it's almost literary with the voiceovers and Samsoon reflecting on her life and just her philosophies and the things that get her through the day, and her memories of her father, and just introspective things. There are some things that don't necessarily hold up, and one of those things is, I want to say, Hyunbin. I mean, his character, not Hyunbin himself. We love Hyunbin, but his character Jinhan is kind of a jerk. Like, he's a major ass. And not only is he an ass, he's kind of like not a charming ass. He's just very heavy-handed, humorless, and thinks that everything should go his way. And he's very used to getting his own way. And even when he falls for Samsoon and she points out all of his flaws, it's like he's a very slow learner, because I want to say, for instance, the way that he talks down to Samsoon is really off-putting. And it was probably off-putting at the time a little bit, but we kind of warmed up to him. He sees her value and he falls for her, and, cue major character arc. But I don't think that arc was arced enough. The good thing is she's always calling him out on his bullshit. And I think maybe that's what made it, if not palatable, then it made it something that we could live with, because he wasn't then victimizing her. He wasn't putting her down because she refused to be put down. She called him on everything and stood up and was never trampled. So really, he made himself look bad. He didn't make her feel bad. I honestly do remember my one sort of hang up about the show at the time was that I never warmed up to him. I felt like he was never worthy of her, and I don't think his acting was strong enough to pull off that charming douchebag. I think he was just a douchebag sometimes. And I do think he got better. So that is a skill that Hyunbin did work on, because he's played a lot of assholes since. He tends to do this, but he's found ways to make it charming. So like in 2010, he did Secret Garden, and he plays a major jerk, but that jerk had some charm. We're able to kind of accept some of those things because there is a redeemable side to him. I will argue that Jinan in Kim Samsoon is not one of those characters. He's just kind of flat. I think there was not enough done to soften him. And I think most people will agree, because, okay, at the time, he was largely seen as like swoony and handsome, and, he was a rich chaebol character who didn't swoop in to save Samsoon, but he did see her value and decide he wanted to be with her. And so that was kind of like his redeeming arc. But they did in 2024 make a director's cut of the show where the director, he took the 16 episodes and he recut it down into an 8 episode, like tighter version. He even said that when he went back to see it, there's a lot of aspects about this Chinon character that don't hold up and that don't feel right in this modern sensibility. And so he went in and ruthlessly cut them as much as he could because he didn't think it held up. And I think another part of the 8 episode director's cut is that I think they focused a lot more on the relationship. If you're watching the drama, the full drama, there are, some side stories. There's the sister character, there's other people at the restaurant that they work at. So I think they were doing a much more focused 8 episode arc. Not to make it seem like we were completely blind at the time, there was a sentiment in the beginning that Hyunbin's character was maybe not so likable. It just wasn't maybe the prevailing sentiment, and because the drama was so popular and was doing so well, it didn't really stick around. And Hyunbin did say in interviews afterward that he did get some flack for his character, not for his acting of the character, but for just his character being a jerk. And that it's something that, definitely has changed in the intervening years. And our expectations, at least, of what we want in our leading men have changed for the better, I think, thankfully. Tropes. Some of the tropes that you'll see in Kim Samsoon are very popular tropes that I think encapsulate that Hallyu drama, that class of dramas that we know to be like the classic K-drama rom-com sort of set of tropes. You're going to see a lot of these in Samsoon. I think it's one, partially a mark of the times, and then two, partially it might have popularized some of these things. So you're going to see the love triangle or the love rectangle where you have the main couple, and then you have the other woman played by Chung Yo-won who comes back, and she's the ex-girlfriend who wants back in his life. And then you'll have the Daniel Henney come in and he's in love with Chung Yo-won, and it's a whole sort of unrequited love square for a while. I think that's actually part of why Hyunbin got a lot of flack for that character, is because he kind of is caught between the two women, and he's not so good about delineating. It's borderline cheating, I want to say, and Samsoon calls him out on that. When he thinks that he's just trying to be true to his feelings and try to figure out what he wants and what's good for everybody, she's like, no, you're cheating. Like, you're trying to keep me close and you haven't broken up with her, which means you haven't chosen, which means you're cheating. And I think that's a thing that we would maybe not put up with that much ambiguity these days, at least not from the lead that we're supposed to be swooning over. Chung Yo-won plays this like ailing, sickly other woman who, it was almost like she kept a secret from him for his own good. And that became kind of like almost a cliche character in dramas afterward. That wasn't the first time we'd seen a character like her, but because of this drama, we kind of kept seeing it for a while. So in the drama, Chung Yo-won and Hyunbin's characters are dating, and she finds out that she has cancer, and rather than telling him she has cancer, she decides she's going to leave him, ask him to wait for her, give him a lame, vague excuse about wanting to go off and study in the States, and then cut off all contact until she's better. And so, of course, he's incredibly hurt and angry and accepts this as a breakup. Whereas when she comes back 3 years later, cancer all better, she thinks that they can kind of pick up where they left off, and he's understandably not having it. But the whole misunderstanding of why she left, she goes from terrible other spiteful woman to somebody who, very understandably was trying to protect his feelings and was sick. And like, how do you argue with somebody who had cancer? And she's so pretty and frail, and, don't you want to protect her? And of course she presents the perfect foil to Samsoon, who is so strong and certain and never wavers from her own convictions. She presents this like kind of wishy-washy alternative. So it's an interesting like take on the other woman. And I do think they did it well because we don't really hate her. She's not malicious. She just wants her own happy life back and thinks that she can have it because she now is armed with the truth. One thing that was really unique about this show was Chung Yo-won and Daniel Henney, their English scenes. This was at a period where there were not a lot of like native English speakers. Okay, there still aren't a lot of good English speaking actors in K-dramas, but at the time it was super rare, and you had these two talking really naturally. Like honestly, it seemed almost unscripted at times because the kind of interplay was so natural that I think it really worked. Another trope is the older woman, younger man kind of dynamic. Although I never really saw this as a Nuna romance. She's only 3 years older. She's 30 and he's 27, and they don't seem that far apart in age. He never calls her Nuna. Nuna. They never have that kind of relationship. I think it maybe is more relevant that she's 30 than she is older than him, because 30, I guess at the time, I mean, 30 was sort of like the death knell for somebody who wants to get married. And Samsoon wants marriage. She wants kids. She wants a family. And so she's very dutifully going on these marriage blind dates. She's signing up for dating services and trying to meet her match. And she's kind of clear-eyed about her options. I don't love that she thinks that, for instance, this is the best I can do, and I should be glad that somebody's interested in me, and so I'll take it because it's better than nothing. I don't like that, but I also think that the way that she sees herself is very matter of fact. She doesn't believe she's lesser because she's 30 and because she's not conventionally pretty, but she's very clear that everybody sees her as lesser, and so she is matching her expectations to that reality. Again, I hate that that is the reality, but she isn't depressed about it. She's just very like, well, this is what I was dealt with, and this is the way I'm going to handle it. I don't know. I have trouble with it sometimes, but I appreciate how Kim Sana approached it and how Samsoon is portrayed, because I can see how they could have done it in an alternative way where she is more insecure. And I think that would have been much more damaging to my psyche, at least, because I found some vindication in Samsoon as a character. And I also think it's pretty telling that when Samsoon is asked at one point what is her ideal man, she's not talking about like, oh, I want him to have a good job and I want him to, have a car and this kind of looks and whatever. She says, my ideal is the kind of man who will introduce me proudly as this is my girlfriend. And that is something she didn't have with her cheating, lying ex. And honestly, something that Hyunbin's character also struggles with. He's a little better in that once he's all in on the relationship, he's not embarrassed of her, and he is very like willing to introduce her as his girlfriend, but he takes some time getting there. And that's very telling because she has already accepted herself, and so the ultimate goal for her partner is to accept her as she is. That's the bare minimum for her, but that's also the only thing she wants. And that's also something that makes it really hard for me to warm to Hyunbin's character is he's like, ah, I I really didn't like him, and the way that he says things like there's this one scene. Even this one scene where he's defending Samsoon as his girlfriend, and the way he does it is like, yeah, she's not pretty. She's also kind of fat, but you know what? I like her, and it just I think at the time you're supposed to think that that was so like evolved of him, I guess. But I think that is the part that doesn't age. Well, I don't even think it was ever good to begin with, so it was never super palatable. I'm glad that we see that now. Okay, also another trope that we don't see a lot now that we used to see in almost every single drama ever was the wrist grab, and we used to make fun of it as being just kind of like this thing that you see all the time. And there are a couple scenes in this drama where it's almost like a joke of a wrist grab because it's extended, like the wrist grab, and then their wrist is grabbed, and then their wrist is grabbed. I remember there being parodies of that at the time where you would just see like a wrist grab train when there were like 10 people wrist grabbing each other. So we did understand that it was funny at the time. It was overdone for the drama. But I think this happened during a time where it was still seen as a dramatic, like an effective dramatic device, maybe even swoony in the right context. I remember there being a time when I thought the wrist grab was okay, maybe a marker of like swooniness, a swoony trope. Now it's not that I have a problem with it, but it's just funny. It's like campy at this point. When I look back on these episodes, I'm also kind of struck by the amount of casual violence that's played for slapstick comedy in this show. And that actually is striking to me, where a character, if they're mad at somebody, instead of just like storming off, she'll kick him in the shin or knock him down or, do something that's meant to be kind of laughed at. And there's this one moment where Samsoon kicks Jinan and Jung Yo-won next to him goes, you deserve that, right? And it's played for comedy, but it's interesting. One thing that I didn't recall at the time, but I was very like startled by in the rewatch was how many slaps there were. And I mean, just to be clear, I think 0 is the acceptable number of slaps in a drama. And I think I counted 3, which is 3 too many. I don't mean to be gendered, but it's also worse when it's a man slapping a woman. That's probably a problematic statement, but I do think it's worse when it's a man slapping a woman. There is one of those. I'm shocked that we ever thought that was okay. It would totally not fly now. The ending. Okay, let's talk about the ending, at least in a little bit. I won't give away spoilers fully, but what was interesting for the time is that it was not the fairy tale Cinderella and they got married and lived happily ever after ending that a lot of rom-coms were giving us at the time. It kind of like wrapping up with a neat bow and a curtain call and all of that. It was an open-ended sort of ending. So when we end the drama, the relationship is in a good place. We still have the certainty that they're in love and they're still in it, but there are real life hurdles and they haven't overcome them fully. And so it kind of leaves us with this open end. It gives us enough confirmation of the relationship that we feel like we can walk away satisfied, but it's a very realistic sort of feeling. And that was kind of new. There weren't a lot of dramas that were doing this. Even if you have a tragic drama, you're usually going to see some kind of conclusion through it. So having us almost trail out of this story, headed in the right direction, but not really wrapping up the strings, tying up the loose ends, it was definitely different. You can kind of extend your imagination in the way that you want to. So if you want to believe that they had their magical fairy tale happily ever after, you can. And if you don't, or if you feel like that's not what you need out of this, then it doesn't give that to you either. So I think for me, I fall kind of in the middle where did they make it for the long haul? I hope so, but it doesn't diminish my appreciation for what the show did to not know with that certainty that they did. So the legacy. All right, well, let's talk about post Samsoon and what it left behind. The reason I even wanted to pick this drama, and this is probably going to be one of the older dramas that I'll talk about. It's pretty old, but it left behind a legacy and it has definitely made a mark in the world of K-drama. One of those things is, as we said, the new type of heroine. There were articles written at the time about how Samsoon and a couple of other shows were presenting us with these like imperfect, likable but unlikable type of heroines. Like, oh, they're quirky, but we still like them. Some of those articles don't age well either, like those think pieces where they're like, oh, this new generation of foul-mouthed and unattractive women, we still love them. Definitely backhanded in some cases, but it showed like an evolution of taste of what we wanted to see. We wanted to see more relatability. We wanted to see different kinds of people and not just like that one demure Cinderella, which we were all kind of getting tired of. There were so many of them. This drama made megastars out of everyone and made them all, at least the four main actors, into household names. Kim Sana went on to have a pretty, solid career afterward. I think Kim Samsoon is probably still one of her most beloved and well-known characters, but, she did lots of shows after. She's still acting, she's still in lead roles, and she did a lot of roles afterward. As, I Do, Scent of a Woman, Woman of Dignity, lots of shows. Hyun I think, is the one whose star has risen the most, and this was really the start of it. You can definitely trace it back to this. This is the drama that made Hyun. He continued to have leading roles in lots of dramas afterward. Some were modest successes, some much bigger. So like Snow Queen, Worlds Within were sort of in that medium range. Secret Garden being a huge hit. Then there were things like, Hyde, Jekyll and Me, not a super fan of that. Memories of the Alhambra, kind of in the middle as well. And then, of course, Crash Landing on You. He's also had a pretty solid movie career. And so, I don't think I have to belabor the point on Hyunbin. He's a huge star and we all love him. Jung Yo-won has had a pretty solid career as well. She's done a lot of dramas, done a lot of leading roles. Again, I think this still ranks as being one of her top, most recognizable and well-known shows. Some of her notable hits right afterward were What Star Are You From? Castaway in the Moon, My Girlfriend Has Two Faces. Those are movies, the latter two. History of a Salaryman, Walk of Love, May It Please the Court, etc. So, been a steady career. Daniel Henney, I think, for the 5 to 7 years after Samsoon, that was the major active years of his career in Korea. Spring Waltz, Seducing Mr. Perfect, Confidential Assignment 2, My Father. Around, I want to say like 2012, I think, is when he took on more roles in English-speaking like US productions. He had appearances in like Hawaii Five-0 and NCIS, and then he got Criminal Minds and the Amazon Prime show, The Wheel of Time. So now he's active, in the US side of things. But for a number of years, he was really exceedingly popular in Korea. And the obvious answer being very, very good looking and kind of was held up as like the ideal of male beauty at the time. One more thing about the drama's popularity, particularly internationally, was that it not only was doing well when it was exported, but there were also a lot of remakes. So in 2008, it was remade in the Philippines, and again in 2020 in Thailand. And for a period there, it looked like we might even get a US remake of this in 2008 when NBC optioned the show to make their own version of it. That never came to pass, but I think if anything, it just shows that that was kind of a period, like a very early nascent period of K-dramas going abroad and exporting the format that we saw happening for a little bit. But what I think it speaks to is that for a while there was this exploration of exporting more of the K-drama format abroad in other areas. You still see that happening a lot in the Southeast Asian regions, but in the US, there was, a few that made it to air, like The Good Doctor, which was based on the Korean drama with Ju-won. Was it Better Late Than Never, which is that variety show that was based on the Grandpa Over Flowers, and then a few movies like Old Boy being remade and The Lake House. I think that there was a period where that interest was more concentrated, but we're maybe past that because the actual Korean dramas are now, being seen on streaming services and getting their own audiences. So it's less about translating them and more about bringing them directly to the audiences. And I'm not really sure how I feel about an American Kim Samsoon. I think it would probably lose all the properties that made me love the Korean version. And we had Bridget Jones, and that worked so well for maybe not an American, but a Western audience that I don't know if I would have really seen the need for that, or I don't know if I would have loved it, or if it would have been just so dear to my heart that it would have hurt to see that happen in a lesser form. In any case, that didn't happen, so it's a moot question. All right, so I think we've kind of, hit all the main points of Kim Samsoon, which still is near and dear to my heart and gave us the blueprint for a lot of things that K-dramas took on in the years afterward, really shaped how fun, fizzy, trendy dramas approached their characters and their storylines, and really is a marker of kind of the best of that first wave of Hallyu back in the day. So I hope you enjoyed walking down memory lane with me on Kim Samsoon, and I hope to see you soon.